Greetings, 500 block of Clematis Street, downtown West Palm Beach. Welcome to another episode of The Reporters. I'm Joe Capozzi, and this is my colleague.
I'm Joel Engelhardt.
And we're live from Respectable Street Cafe.
Live recorded on December 5th, 2022.
But really, who's paying attention, right? Right across the street from Subculture Coffee, which is owned by our sponsor, the Subculture Group. Joel and I are both longtime journalists with more than 50 years combined experience working at the Palm Beach Post. We left the Post 2 years ago. I think might have been this week, our 2-year anniversary of no longer working at the Post. And since then, we've each launched local news websites. Mine is called byjoecapozzi.com. If you have any better ideas for a website, I'm all ears. But that's my website for the last year and a half, and I just have been writing about just local human interest stories that the Post and the TV folks can't get to just because of the state of journalism these days, where the economics are not favorable to staff numbers. Joel, his website is called ongardens.org. Is that correct? The .org? Tell us about your site.
Yeah, I will. And while we're talking about crowdsourcing names, we would love to come up with a good name for this radio show, which right now we're calling The Reporters because we are reporters. But we are open to other ideas. I wanted to tell you guys about the Wayne Gretzky story about how Palm Beach Gardens canceled a contract that it had made with a nonprofit to build 2 ice rinks up in Palm Beach Gardens in a regional county park owned by the county. And they canceled it because the funding fell through for the nonprofit, and they proposed a different method of funding that the city rejected. And then it came out that they had conversations with Wayne Gretzky, who lives in Palm Beach Gardens. If you don't know who Wayne Gretzky is,
the great one.
He is considered the greatest hockey player of all time, which, is almost a way into today's subject, which involves Ukrainians, and they have great hockey players, and Russians, who also have great hockey players, and so it's not just a Canadian game. But Wayne was a Canadian, and he lives in Palm Beach Gardens, and he was gonna let his hockey school, he was going to look for opening his hockey school down here at this new facility that is now up in the air. So that's a story you can find there, or you could find a story about the Sunset Lounge and how West Palm Beach is in a lawsuit over disqualifying the bidders. And I got a chance to read some depositions that provided some interesting glimpses into the behind the scenes of the city of West Palm Beach.
And it's ongardens.org. Good. Just not to confuse it with the Joe Capozzi, byjoecapozzi.com.
Right.
So, I posted a story this morning. If you can check out my website, I've been doing a lot of arts writing lately for whatever reason. I live in Lake Worth Beach, and it's a pretty big arts community. And I wrote about a phenomenon called pop-up galleries, where these are artists that get together and they have a art showing and an exhibit, and they're doing it in their homes, in their apartments, and they open it to the public. So that's my latest story that you can see today. I wrote a story a few days ago about World AIDS Day. The AIDS memorial quilt, the largest portion of it in South Florida, is on display at Compass in Lake Worth Beach. And they had an unveiling ceremony of the 2 new panels the other night. So that story's on there. And a story I did about a year ago was about our guest today. His name is Dean Turney. I've known Dean for a long time just as a journalist working with Dean. He's a high-profile mover and shaker in Wellington and the equestrian industry. But that's not what the story was about. Dean decided to go on vacation in April to Ukraine, which was under attack by the Russians, and it was a pretty compelling story about why Dean did that. And anyway, without further ado, welcome, Dean, and how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I would like to state my disagreement about Wayne Gretzky being the greatest hockey player ever. You're probably a little too young, but Gordie Howe was by far the best player ever.
What about Mario Lemieux?
He was good also, but none of them can get close.
Bobby
to,
Hull.
The Gordie Howe.
Was
Hull
Gordie
was good
Bobby
too.
was Gordie Howe the one that played into his 50s
Yeah.
with the Hartford Whalers?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Wayne might agree with you, Dean, because
Yeah.
he loved Gordie Howe.
Yeah,
and then he
and-
broke all of his records.
Yeah, well, and Gordie wouldn't recognize it, and it hurt Gretzky's feelings, but they kind of made up before Howe died a few years ago.
Yeah, I'll be celebrating my 59th birthday in January. I can't believe I said that. 59, and Gordie Howe was playing in his 50s. That blew my mind.
Yeah, and in that league, he actually led in scoring the 1 year, and he was like a little over 50 at that time.
Take that, Tom Brady.
Yeah, yeah.
Nolan Ryan pitched into his 50s too. Do I want to say? I can't read now.
Satchel
40s.
Paige.
Satchel Paige. Yeah.
But enough of sports.
So Dean, anyway, so Ukraine's under attack, and you decide you're going to go to Ukraine, and it wasn't quite a vacation, right? Tell us about why you went.
Yeah, well, really need to go back to the first time I visited Ukraine, which was in 2015.
And they were not under attack.
Right, but it was right after the Maidan revolution, where Ukraine literally booted out the president of the country at that time, who favored Russia and who was Putin's puppet. So he hauled tail to Moscow. And then shortly after that is when Russia invaded Crimea. So it was a year after that I first visited Ukraine, and it happened to coincide with the 70th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day from World War II. So I was able to, watch and actually participate in some of the festivals and parades and what have you. And an interesting thing happened. I was having lunch with a representative of the tourism agency from Ukraine, and we were discussing World War II, and she asked me, well, how did the Americans get to Berlin at the end of the war? And it struck me a little bit, but then I kind of understood what she had been taught. And so I asked her, do you ever hear of the invasion at Normandy? No. Ever hear of General Eisenhower? No. General Patton? No. A series of questions until I got to, have you ever heard of John Wayne? She said, oh yeah, I've heard about him. But anyway, they've been taught that it was strictly the Red Army that defeated the Nazis. But that was, go ahead.
And of course, the Red Army, the Russians, were begging Eisenhower to begin the invasion far earlier to relieve the pressure they were feeling on their front.
Exactly. Stalin was bitching and moaning, you need to open up a second front, and we were supplying them, with a lot of armaments and food and really kept them going despite, Hitler and Stalin having a pact prior to Hitler's invasion, the Ribbentrop-Molotov agreement, where they divided up Poland, and presumably Russia was supposed to get Finland, but Finland beat them just like the Ukrainians are beating them now. So that was my first trip, was right after they took over Crimea and right after the Ukrainians had booted out their president, who was friendly with Putin. And that's when the whole effort accelerated to where Ukraine wanted to be closer to the they wanted to become part of the European Union. That's when they started entertaining becoming a member of NATO. And that's really, I think, is when Putin started contemplating invading Ukraine, since he no longer had his puppet as the country's president. So then...
so you visited it in 2015.
Yeah, so 2015 was the first time I visited. And fast forward to this past year, and as the Russians started more or less barricading Ukraine with the Russian military surrounding its borders, I think a lot of people, I was wondering, how's Ukraine going to react? Because when Russia went into Crimea, basically the Ukrainian response was nothing. There was really no organized opposition to that, no military opposition anyway. So I decided I really wanted to go to Ukraine to see what it was like. And being somewhat of a World War II buff, I had also enjoyed being there where that war was fought. But anyway, just out of curiosity, curiosity killed the cat. Fortunately, it didn't kill me.
And your ancestry also.
Yeah, and actually, I've got Ukrainian and Russian heritage. So my Ukrainian part took over the Russian part, and so my first trip, which was actually, I'm sorry, my second trip, but the first trip since the war started, I hooked up with a charity called Hand to Hand Ukraine, and they provided me with a huge luggage full of supplies to take to some men that wanted to become part of the military. But at that time, Ukraine had a severe lack or shortage of clothes even for military. So what I took were night vision goggles, boots, gloves, those types of items, obviously, non-lethal military supplies. So again, at that point in the war, those were the types of items that were needed. And also at that time, you had militias forming in Ukraine that were not officially part of the military, but then as the militias became organized, then they would be absorbed into the Ukrainian military. So and you still have that to a certain degree now. You have what are called regiments that aren't actually part of the army, but they coordinate with the army. So it's that was my first trip, was to take non-lethal military supplies.
So did you have any sense in your trips over there during the war, during the current conflict, were you did you see other Americans there that were doing kind of the same thing you were doing, or did you not meet a single American?
No, I thinking back, I don't recall meeting any Americans, on either trip. I do want to say the Ukrainian people were very thankful, gracious, what have you. Had my teeth cleaned, and they didn't charge me for that.
So you went to Ukraine during the war to get your teeth cleaned?
Yeah, so cavity filled, all at either free or great discounts. So the Ukrainian people were extremely gracious and thankful for my small effort and more so of what the United States has been doing to help Ukraine and the West and Europe in general.
So where did you stay while you were there?
I rented an apartment, and my first visit. Let's back up a little bit. My first visit. Let me back up a little further. There is no commercial air traffic in Ukraine, so you cannot fly into Ukraine since the war started. So my first visit, I flew into Budapest, stayed there for a few days. I enjoyed Hungary a lot. It's a very interesting country, very advanced country for being a former Soviet satellite. So I flew into Budapest. Some of the members of the nonprofit that I was working with helped arrange private transportation from Budapest across the Ukrainian border into a small town, which name I can't remember, that had a train station. And from there, I took a train to Lviv, which is about 40 miles from the Polish border, and that's where I stayed the first 2 weeks. And that's where I delivered the supplies, the military supplies that I was taking. Once the military supplies were picked up, I then went on to Kiev, and fortunately, it was about the same time that the Russians were pulling out of the Kiev region. If you recall, they had the long column of tanks and other military vehicles. And so about the time they were pulling back, I was arriving in Kiev. So the first time I was there, I stayed, about almost 3 months. And there was only one missile attack during that period.
Near where you were living.
Yeah, near. I heard it. It was on the outskirts of Kiev. They were aiming for, well, what they claimed was a facility that was repairing tanks, and actually, and I went and saw it, it was a facility that was repairing train cars. They call them wagons there, passenger train cars. So that was the extent of, as close as, bombs or missiles came to me my first trip. My second trip became a little more scary. I had an apartment in the same building. It's a new building, 26 stories. The second trip I was on the 5th floor, so I was about the same level as all the other buildings in the area. So I felt pretty safe as far as being immune from a horizontal hit from a missile. And this one morning, the air raid sirens went off, which they did about 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. So at about 6 in the morning, air raid siren went off, and then about an hour later, I hear what I thought it sounded like a small, like military aircraft, a jet fighter or something of that nature. It kept getting a little closer, and then all of a sudden I hear these 2 very loud explosions, and they hit about one block away. And it's what a lot of y'all heard about here. It's where they hit one of the missiles hit a playground that was in an urban park. There was maybe a few acres in size, and the playground was maybe 1 acre in size, but it left a crater about 10, 15 feet deep and about 40 feet wide. Fortunately, there were no deaths caused by that particular missile, but the other missile that hit in where there were some stores that killed 2 people. So from that,
What is it like when that happens? What do the people? How do the people behave when you go out to look at that? Were they very solemn? Was there anger?
Yeah, anger, solemn. There were some elderly people looking at it and just shaking their heads. And what happened was when those missiles hit, and I could tell they were very close by, and then I saw the smoke rising. Like an idiot, first thing I did was open up my window, and I had big, windows. And no screen, so I'm sticking my head out, looking around. I said, Dean, this probably isn't a smart thing to do. You should probably get into the interior of the building. So at that point, I packed my backpack with some items I would need, and to always have it at the ready to grab, once there was air raid sirens again, and get into the interior of the building. But it's a plan I never implemented. I was still too curious to, and I stuck my head out, several times to see what was being hit.
But you had your Kalashnikov, right?
No, I was offered to have a Kalashnikov, and actually I was going to accept the offer, and that's when the Russians were still, menacing the outskirts of Kiev. But say by the time I got there, they were already in the withdrawal process. But
they knew you were coming.
They
so
knew
they
I was
got
coming.
the hell out of Dodge.
My bare hands were sufficient to take them on.
Is there any lawlessness in a country that is under such pressures and with everybody armed?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's here. Whenever there's some type of disturbance, unfortunately, you have looting and things of that nature. And in Ukraine, there was no hint of that. Everybody is very well behaved, and other than hating and despising the Russians, they're very more or less peaceful country. But yeah, no, there was no civil disobedience or any type of uprisings.
So when you would go out for walks or to the grocery store, I don't know what you did. You didn't stay in your apartment building the whole time, but when you would go out, did you have to wear like a helmet, a war helmet, or a vest, or you were just like you
No.
were walking down the streets in
Just-
Wellington?
Yeah, just like walking down Wellington or West Palm Beach. It's probably actually safer than in a lot of large cities these days than in the U.S. But yeah, no, and even when even after Putin started his missile attacks on Kiev, people still weren't running to the shelters when the air raid sirens would go off. From what I understand, when the war first started, people did run for the shelters, and you have these huge underground shelters that also serve as tunnels at large intersections. And what they've done is they've actually converted those to malls. So you have all these shops in these underground tunnels that are underneath intersections. So
you could pick up a sweater at the Gap while you're dodging
and
missiles.
some of them were very high end, with jewelry. It's almost like a Worth Avenue type. Others were, vegetables and that type of thing, flowers. So those, if people were, near one of those types of shelters, they would go into those. But otherwise, you didn't see people, running for the shelters.
So you said the reception you got was welcoming. They appreciated that you were helping. But it's like even when you landed in Hungary or in Poland or wherever, and then you made your way into Ukraine, at the checkpoints, were they looking at like an American passport? Like, what are you doing here? Did you get any of that suspicion? Or
No. The first trip in, it was private transportation, but it was a van, and there were probably about 9 people total that they had picked up, and we crossed the border at about midnight. The people I was with were mostly Ukrainians, and they were returning because they had heard that the Russians were withdrawing from the Kiev area, and so they're returning, and they were wondering what the hell I was heading there. The lady next to me was a dentist from Kharkiv. She was returning not to Kharkiv, but to she was going to practice dental work with another dentist clinic. So those were Ukrainians, and they all thought I was a little crazy, but very, very thankful when I told them what I was doing. I said, my luggage is full of supplies for some friends of friends that eventually want to get into the military.
wow. So I know you've talked to me one-on-one about this, but tell our listeners the story of Monsignor Turney.
I've done different things while I've been here and when I was in Ukraine, obviously. And I was approached by a Ukrainian American young lady. It advised me that the family church that they had gone to, her parents were married there. Her parents' parents had been married there. It was like it was really part of the community, and that was in Kharkiv. And it had been blown up by the Russians. And what the Russians were doing, and still doing, you have people there that they pay to provide coordinates of, like institutions or buildings, whatever, that are important to Ukrainian society. So like churches, museums, art galleries, anything having to do with culture and religion, the Russians have been targeting. So this church was targeted, and they blew it up. And what had happened was the priest had been halted at the Polish border, and for some reason the Polish guards were requiring him, the priest, to provide a letter from a U.S. church inviting them to the United States.
Proving that he had a sponsor to somewhere to go.
Yeah, they need a sponsor. So she asked me, can you get a letter from a church in the U.S. Inviting them? I thought, geez, I haven't been to church in a month of Sundays, and go
Yeah,
straight
guys,
to
I
hell.
figured you went to confession before you went over anyway.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not Catholic, but I did a lot of confessing on my trip. But anyway, so I was thinking, it's going to take me forever to find a church that would be willing to do this, going through the whatever paperwork would be necessary. So I decided to create my own church. I created a letterhead, and I used an actual church. I won't name what church it is.
Florida Church?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the
here
best part.
Here in West Palm Beach, because
St.
just
Anne's?
in case somebody was going to, look it up. Well, yes, okay, that is a church. But, I gave them my phone number as the contact, and then I became Monsignor Turney and inviting, and I can't remember the priest's name, and you actually had to put in the letter the names of all the family members. So there's the priest and the 8 members of his family were all listed in this letter on this letterhead that I had created. I emailed it to the young lady. She emailed it to the priest who was waiting there at the Polish border. He showed the border police, here's my letter from Monsignor Turney, and they let him in.
Monsignor Turney.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
So if they're all listening, they're in the border. Now that's not going to work again.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, that's true.
So now
That's all a fib,
you just laid out a movie script. This could be a sequel to Argo.
Yeah.
You're all familiar with Argo, and they made up the fake movie to get the hostages out.
Yeah.
So
Let me reintroduce our guest. It's Dean Turney, the Wellington equestrian consultant, with Joe Capozzi and Joel Engelhardt here on the Reporters.
Go ahead. Any specific questions?
Well, we wanted to ask you a little bit about what's going on in Wellington these days.
it's a nice segue from the battlefields of Ukraine to the political minefields of Wellington.
Yeah, well, Wellington, after several years of political turmoil, has actually settled down. There are no active lawsuits that I'm familiar with. There is a proposal that would unite 2 of the major disciplines, the jumpers, the 100 jumpers, which is the primary equestrian discipline in Wellington, and it would combine that with the dressage venue would become part of that.
And this is a really major proposal because the developer of it, Mark Bellissimo, who's been active in Wellington for 15 years, is describing it as basically building a mini Vail, Colorado, where he'd have a section of housing that would go for $5 million each. Aside from moving around the venues and recreating the venues that are used for these sports that attract so many people from all over the world to Wellington. So a proposal like this goes beyond the village borders, doesn't it? How would it have impact throughout all of Palm Beach County if the Wellington Village Council allows these changes that he's seeking?
Well, the equestrian industry in Wellington really is a regional benefit for Palm Beach County and the state of Florida. It brings in millions and millions of dollars from well over 40 countries that have riders, horses, horse owners coming to Wellington and spending big money. Horses are very expensive, and these types of horses are extremely expensive. The project you're referring to is I'm not directly involved in that, but that would, I say, combine dressage, which is currently at a separate venue.
And what is dressage?
Dressage is, people kind of refer to it as dancing, the horses dancing to the music. It really has its origins in the military, going back hundreds of years when horses were a very integral part of armies. So you have some of the movements that they actually the dance moves have their origins in military movements. They lift up their feet high and kind of stomp, or that's as the soldiers are attacking the horse rider. So anyway, it's interesting to read about the history of dressage. But anyway, that has a separate venue right now. It's about half a mile from the major venue in Wellington, which hosts the Winter Equestrian Festival. That's the Hunter Jumper competition. It runs from the first week of January until the first week of April. So it would move the dressage venue to become part of the Winter Equestrian Festival venue. So you'd have that expansion, and where the dressage venue currently is, that would then become housing that you just, described under this proposal.
Do you recall how many homes they're talking about there? A couple hundred?
No, it's not that many. Like I say, I'm not directly involved in that, but
That's okay.
Anyway, it's much lower than that because it's only like 40 acres or something like that, and they would be fairly large.
40
homes.
to 80 probably.
Yeah.
And a hotel.
No, that would actually be across the street, so it would not be in the equestrian area.
Which is
So-
where they're verboten.
Yeah, so the hotels, are currently not allowed in the equestrian area. So right across the street from the equestrian area, hotels are allowed, so that's where the proposed hotel would be located.
And it wasn't that long ago where a proposal like this would have gotten a lot of opposition, where campaigns were being waged, where candidates were raising $500,000 for a small village council campaign because of all the wealth that is involved in the equestrian activities. I think we've talked before about some of the celebrities who have homes out there. Do you recall a few of those?
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen is probably the most
And it's
well known.
his daughter is
His daughter, and she actually competed in the Olympics. So she's a very
for
accomplished.
dressage or
No, jumping.
show jumping.
Show jumping. Let's see. Bill Gates has actually bought up several properties adjacent to the show grounds.
So
Lou Dobbs.
He's not just in Seattle. His daughter, Bill Gates' daughter also?
Yeah. And who's the lady?
You say Lou Dobbs and
Lou Dobbs. I can't remember her name, but it's. She was with the Irish guy, the short guy. what was?
I need more to go on.
So-
She an American?
Yeah. Anyway, but she's another famous one that I don't
Bono's
remember.
wife or
So do they actually, like Springsteen and Gates, are they out there watching these competitions, or they just threw the money to here?
Yeah, no,
Play- have fun.
they're actually out there.
Supporting their
I've
children.
seen see William Devane.
William Devane.
Yeah, and who's the guy in The Godfather? The attorney.
Ru-
Is it
Duvall, Robert Duvall?
Robert Duvall. Yeah, Robert Duvall.
And
I've seen him.
Tommy
out
Lee
there.
Jones was out there way
Yeah,
back
he had a
when,
play. I don't.
right?
It's
Yeah.
been several years since.
And then there's
he's been there.
political behind-the-scenes folks like the Mercers. Don't know if you're familiar with them. Right, Joel? Didn't they have property out there?
It's interesting that there's like this whole separate world of celebrity wealth with Palm Beach. They don't really mix, it seems.
No. And that's and one of the reasons that they've wanted a hotel out there, or well, a high-end hotel, is because you do have a lot of people that stay at the Breakers and hotels, high-end hotels on the island, and so that would actually kind of reduce that traffic in and out of the village if you had a hotel, as part of or right next to a venue, to where they could walk or take a golf cart.
Yeah, in the winter, I know all the seasonal rentals fill up out there, and it's just overwhelmed.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that rent out their house during the season, and they get enough money to pay the mortgage for the year.
Wow.
So yeah, it is, and some people actually have bought a second house, and for the purpose of renting it out during the season. They might rent it out during the season, then for the summer, but when they rent it for the season is where you get the big money.
And this is the busy time of the year, right? This is the Winter Equestrian Festival that's going on?
Yes. that begins the first week of January, so right after the first of the
So
year.
that's coming up.
Yeah,
All right.
you currently have, other competitions, but it's the Winter Equestrian Festival that's the big one.
The big one.
That's the most money as far as prize money. It's the best horses, the best riders in the world. You do have, during the Olympic periods, you do have Olympic qualifiers as part of the Winter Equestrian Festival.
And the festival is free and open to the public.
Yeah, there's a parking fee. It's actually totally free throughout the week. It runs Wednesday through Sunday every week during the day from about 8 a.m. until 4:30, depending on how many horses are competing that day. Saturday night Saturday's the only time you have an evening performance, and that's what you call a Grand Prix. So it's the premier event of that week, and every week is like a separate competition. There's a separate sponsor. There's a different amount of prize money. The highest prize money events are called 5 stars. You have anywhere from 5 stars down to 2 stars. 5 stars, you've got about $500,000 in prize money.
But you were saying, like coming to downtown West Palm Beach, there's a parking fee.
Yeah, so you can you
And
can
it's
load
like
up.
$20
Yeah.
to park, but free to enter.
Yeah, you pay $20 no matter how many people you have in your vehicle, so you can have your family and some friends of families, and it can come out to as low as $2 a head, depending on if you've got a van and 10 people. And the prices for the food and beverage are really very low when you take a look at especially the events in downtown West Palm Beach.
Or the price of a beer at a Dolphins game.
Yeah, at the horse show, things are about as low as you're going to find as far as food and beverage. You can still get a hot dog for about $2 or $3. So anyway, it's a great Saturday night event to take your family, and there are activities to keep the kids occupied. There's a petting zoo. There's a carousel that was imported from Italy. There's street performers. So bring your kids. They won't be bored. So
Then I guess I could park at the Wellington Mall and Uber in. Although that would probably cost $20 too.
yeah.
So we're here with Dean Turney, Wellington equestrian consultant. And we don't want to go without mentioning another part of Dean's past. When he was involved in West Palm Beach politics back in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, he was involved in basically, you were the guy who fingered Jeff Koons for a charge of extortion that led to his removal from the city, from the county commission 3 months before the end of his second term, and caused quite a stir in this county. Feel free to comment on that.
Well, I understand he's palling around with Vladimir Putin these days. It was an unfortunate circumstance. He just, his behavior wasn't proper, especially considering the things I had done, and hopefully he recognizes that. And for me, it's over with. It was an unfortunate circumstance.
To be a little more specific, it involved a phone call from Jeff about a very good project where Dean represented people who were opposed to the project for their own reasons, which they thought were very valid. And according to the prosecutor here in Palm Beach County, Jeff went over the line in making comments on this phone call that was recorded, and Dean and some others turned him in. And as a result, Jeff was prosecuted and given like 5 years probation and forced to resign from the county commission.
Yeah, and I would like to make one thing clear: is he left the message. It's not that I recorded it. He left the message. It was I'd been threatened before, do this or do that. But then when he started saying, I want you to come out and support this project, and I want you to say what a great county commissioner I've been. And that's what to me crossed the line, where he was threatening to use his position to harm me
or your client, right?
and a client, yeah. And I was getting some calls from city commissioners and people at the county that hey, he's really after you, wants to destroy you. And anyway, it's unfortunate. I wish I didn't have to do it, but I don't regret doing what I did because he was trying to destroy me. But I would assume he regrets it, and as I do, that I regret the whole situation.
It's the great little-known story of the Mangrove Islands off of Flagler Drive in downtown West Palm Beach.
Yeah, and I've lived downtown, and the boardwalk, is, I bet you there have not been more than 20 people every year that use that. It's used during Sunfest for people to watch the band on the south stage, but it's never used.
So go walk out on that boardwalk, check out the mangroves and the island, and we'll create a website where you can learn more someday.
You put a statue out there with the mangroves. But yeah, I guess that you have thick skin for that political scrabble, then you could head into Ukraine in the middle of a war.
Yeah, I was prepared.
Are you preparing to go back again, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm hoping to return after the equestrian season. So probably April or May is when I'll head back, and again take supplies, whatever needed. I've been corresponding with a doctor. She's a neurologist. And so before I depart, I'll check with her and some other people in the medical profession that I know there and see if they need any types of medicines. Center City Pharmacy has offered to provide items that are
Right down the road?
Yeah, right down the street
okay.
here.
How did they get in the fray on that?
I've been a
Regular
customer
customer,
of theirs,
and
for
by the
for
way, I'm
years,
going
and-
into Ukraine.
Yeah. So he said, listen, if you need anything, let me know. So I'll take him up on that next trip if I need some type of medical supplies.
Do you want to give listeners a number where they can reach out?
Yeah, well, they can just, my number is 561-346-5497, and then I can get you, depending on what it is you want to donate, I can get you in touch with the proper person with the nonprofit, the Hand to Hand Ukraine.
So when that initial time you went over during the war, the first time, you brought a suitcase full of supplies. Was Hand to Hand also transporting stuff over there that you were going to a pickup point and ferrying their stuff to the Ukrainians, or was it just you just dealt with the stuff that you personally
Yeah,
brought?
just the stuff that I had in one very large luggage, and probably took half the space in another large luggage that I took with me.
Are you in touch with any people who are there now enduring this, what looks like it's going to be a very long, cold winter?
Oh yeah.
What do you hear?
Well, it's when I was there is when they initiated the rolling blackouts in Kyiv. So you'd get it once at some point in the morning for about 4 hours, and then one in the afternoon or evening again for another 4 hours or so. From what I'm being told, those are increasing, and I only had the water shut off one time while I was there, but that's occurring more frequently now. The electricity is damaged, or the facilities are damaged, so they've got to shut down the water supply to people.
That's what happens when the Russians launch a series of missiles at electric power plants and water supply facilities.
Yeah, and they say that they're always aiming at military targets, but people must be blind that are aiming these things, because I saw it with my own eyes where they hit a playground, residential buildings. They're hitting mostly non military and non-infrastructure targets, mostly, apartment buildings.
So you've been over there. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on what's the end game? Is it going to end soon? Or how do you think this is going to play out? Is this going to be like a Vietnam where it's going to go on forever, or?
Well, Russia is running out of a lot of its supplies, both the ammunition and the guns that shoot the ammunition. They have a lot of the low-end weapons and ammunition, cannons and the ammunition for that, and then they've got the high-end, nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, Iran is supplying them with drones, and that's helping sustain their war effort. I'm hoping that, and Israel to me has been kind of disappointing in this whole effort. They've done, very little really to help Ukraine. Now that Netanyahu will be prime minister now, he will take a more aggressive approach at helping Ukraine, because they've demonstrated in the past that they're not afraid to take whatever action it is to, safeguard themselves as well as safeguard others. So, with Mossad, hopefully they'll be able to disrupt the ability of Iran to produce and transport the drones. That's my wishful thinking.
So you think it's going to keep fighting?
Yeah, it'll keep going until Putin is somehow booted out of office. That's going to require both the general population and the oligarchs and some other key people in Russia. It doesn't look promising, but anything can happen.
So Putin sold the Russian people the idea that Ukraine belongs to us, that we need to, that it was never an independent country. It has no claim to independence, and we just need to bring it back into the fold. Is that about right? And how do the people in Ukraine see it?
Yeah, I had my very first experience with a Ukrainian about 40 years ago, and I heard his accent, and I asked him, is he Russian? And no, I thought he was going to take my head off. He said, I'm Ukrainian, and, there's a big difference. I said, well, you sound the same. The Russian people, from what I can see, are pretty much brainwashed. I spoke with a sad number of Ukrainian people who told me they have family members and immediate family members who live in Russia, and they won't talk to them. The ones that are in Russia will not talk to the Ukrainian family members because they absolutely believe Putin, that Nazis are running Ukraine, that they're a puppet of the U.S. So Putin has managed to brainwash a good part of the Russian population, and it's possible now that that's starting to turn around. Now with this partial mobilization, some of the Russian people are finally getting it. I have a Russian group that I participate with. I better be careful here because I don't want to get them in trouble.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Russians, you can get thrown in jail just for calling it a war instead of a conflict or a military operation. And I have this group that I participate with in Moscow. They practice their English. They do it on Friday evening. So I join them by Zoom. And for a while, they were afraid to have me on the show, so to speak. And I would just, talk with them. We'd pick a topic, and just where they could practice their English. And they were afraid to have me, and especially when I was in Ukraine. And they said, "Oh no, I'm sorry. It's really dangerous for us." Now they've invited me again. I participated the last two weeks. We still, avoid talking about Ukraine, but at least they're talking to me, or at least they've invited me to talk to them.
So you don't tell them any of the anti-propaganda that you've heard?
No, I'm very careful when I talk to them, because you can get them in trouble. I mean, they can end up in prison or whatever. I do have some private conversations with a member or two, and we have more or less frank discussions of what's going on, and I advise this person or persons about what's actually going on there, and point out where what Putin is saying is just bullshit.
Really, the war of information is the only way to defeat this, to end this war.
Yeah, and that's what I hear over and over again from the Ukrainians I talk to, is they say, how can this be happening in the 21st century? How can one man brainwash millions and millions of people, and how can they launch a war during these modern times? And on the Russian side, it's starting to impact them. And this is some things that I've heard directly from Russians, that they feel like they're being cut out of the modern world because of the sanctions. And he said, we're restricted on travel. We can't fly over certain countries. And now the items that are being embargoed. They're starting to feel both the cultural and the materialistic impacts of the impositions that the U.S. and the other countries are imposing.
So, do you have a sense from talking to Ukrainians over there if they have a real fear that Putin might use nuclear weapons?
No. That's a good question, and actually, I've never brought that subject up. Although some of them have said, that this guy is nuts. He's threatening nuclear weapons, but I've never heard them express, fear. But they have mentioned that the guy's crazy. Just to even threaten that.
That threat, what it does is it keeps Ukraine from following the Russians back into Russia, because they're knocking them out of Ukraine.
Right.
They attacked that bridge that the Russians considered Russian bridge soil, and if they ever took the war into Russia, and Russia does not have the manpower to throw at them as they don't now, the only alternative for Russia would be to whip out the nukes, and I believe that is why Ukraine will never cross that border.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up. There was a headline just this morning, and there was just very little information, but the Ukrainians have hit, they hit a location, I forget how many hundreds of miles from Moscow, that housed the bomber squadron.
Staging area.
Yeah. So the Ukrainians have.
But they didn't claim responsibility for that hit whatsoever, and they're very worried about the repercussions if it were to be known that.
Right.
Without a doubt that they did it.
Yeah, and they've played coy on some of the Crimean attacks that have been launched, and the bridge.
The bridge wasn't but it was a truck bomber.
Yeah, and people have questioned well, are they going to knock out the bridge again? And kind of one of the thought is that they'll wait for the Russians to repair it and then hit it again, to use the resources.
This is a land bridge to the Crimea.
Yeah, it's the Kerch Bridge that goes from mainland Russia across the Azov Strait and connects Crimea to Mother Russia.
Okay. So again, we are coming to the end here of a lively hour with Dean Turney, who just got back from his second trip to Kyiv and Ukraine during the time of their war with Russia. And I'm Joel Engelhardt with Joe Capozzi.
And Dean, one more time, if listeners want to contribute, they should call you or?
Yeah, just call me at 346-5497.
And if you don't have a cell phone, you'll find him at the Winter Equestrian Festival,
Yeah.
starting in January, right?
Yeah, January, first week of
okay.
January.
Beautiful.
It's
And
the
we-
first Wednesday of January.
And we want to thank you very much for being here, Dean. It was great to have this little talk with you.
Oh, enjoy it. Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, I'm Joe Capozzi. That's my partner, Joel Engelhardt. We're signing off, and we will catch you on another episode of The Reporters.